I still remember the exact moment my life split into two parts. The life before my mother's message, and the life after it. My name is Emily, and for most of my life, I was the quiet daughter. The girl who stayed in her room, kept her grades high, and avoided conflict whenever possible. After my father passed away, my mother became my entire world. It was always the two of us against everything. Then she married Daniel. At first, Daniel seemed perfect. He was charming, polite, and always knew exactly what to say. My mother looked happy again, and that was all I wanted. But over time, something felt wrong. Little things started disappearing from our house. Important documents, family photographs, even some jewelry that belonged to my grandmother. Whenever my mother asked about them, Daniel always had an explanation. You probably misplaced it. You forgot where you put it. You worry too much. And somehow she believed him. I wanted to believe him too, but deep down I didn't. Then my mother got sick. What started as simple exhaustion turned into endless doctor visits, medications, and hospital stays. Daniel suddenly became the perfect husband. He handled the finances, managed appointments, answered questions before my mother could. Everyone praised him. Everyone except me. Something about his kindness felt rehearsed. Like he was performing. One evening, while helping my mother organize old family papers, she handed me a small folded note. "Keep this," she whispered. I looked confused. "What is it?" She smiled weakly. "Our emergency code." I laughed. "Mom, we're not spies." Her expression didn't change. "If I ever send you these numbers, don't ask questions. Just investigate everything." I stared at the note. 5 numbers. 71935. It felt ridiculous, but she insisted. So I put it inside my wallet and forgot about it. Months passed. My mother's condition seemed stable. Then one morning I received a text message. Just 5 numbers. 71935. Nothing else. No greeting. No explanation. No emojis. Just the code. I immediately called her. No answer. Again. Nothing. Then Daniel picked up. "Your mother is resting," he said calmly. "She's fine." Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. "Can I speak to her?" "She's sleeping." "Wake her up." A pause. Then he sighed. "You worry too much, Emily?" The call ended. That night I couldn't sleep, because my mother never sent meaningless messages, and she definitely wouldn't send our emergency code unless something was terribly wrong. But what I didn't know that day was that those 5 numbers were about to expose the biggest lie Daniel had ever told, and destroy the image he had spent years creating. The next morning, I drove straight to my mother's house. Daniel looked surprised when he opened the door. "Emily, you should have called." "Where's Mom?" "She isn't feeling well." "I want to see her." His smile faded for a second. Then he stepped aside. My mother looked exhausted, but the moment she saw me, her eyes widened. Almost like she was relieved. Daniel stayed in the room the entire time, answering questions for her, interrupting conversations, watching every word she said. The emergency code suddenly felt very real. That evening I began investigating. I started with finances. My mother had always been careful with money, but after gaining access to some old records, I noticed strange withdrawals. Large amounts, every month, for nearly 2 years. The money wasn't going toward medical treatment. It was being transferred elsewhere. My heart started racing. Then I found something even worse. Several documents carried my mother's electronic signature. Documents approving financial decisions she would never have agreed to. Property changes, investment transfers, account modifications. The signatures looked authentic, but something felt off. I confronted Daniel. He laughed. "Emily, you don't understand financial paperwork." Maybe he expected me to back down. Instead, I dug deeper. Days turned into weeks. The more I searched, the darker the truth became. Daniel wasn't protecting my mother. He was controlling her. While she was focused on surviving her illness, he had quietly taken control of nearly every major asset she owned. The family home, savings, investments, everything. And then I found the final piece. A hidden email account. Inside were conversations between Daniel and a woman I'd never heard of. The messages weren't romantic. They were strategic. They discussed timelines, money, legal ownership, and one sentence I will never forget. "Once everything is transferred, leaving will be easy." I felt physically sick. My mother hadn't married a loving partner. She had married someone who saw her vulnerability as an opportunity. For years, he had built a perfect reputation. Friends admired him. Neighbors trusted him. Doctors respected him. Meanwhile, he was quietly preparing to walk away with everything she owned. When I showed my mother the evidence, she cried harder than I'd ever seen. Not because of the money, but because of the betrayal. The man she trusted most had been planning his escape all along. That was the moment something changed inside me. The fear disappeared. The sadness remained. But it transformed into determination. Daniel had spent years creating a lie, and I was about to make sure everyone saw the truth. Instead of confronting Daniel immediately, my mother and I stayed quiet. For the first time, we worked together in secret. We gathered evidence, financial records, emails, legal documents, witness statements, everything. Weeks later, Daniel organized a family gathering, the perfect opportunity to showcase his image as the devoted husband. Friends arrived. Relatives arrived. Even some neighbors came. Daniel smiled the entire evening, accepting compliments, receiving sympathy, playing his role perfectly. Then my mother stood up. The room fell silent. Daniel looked confused. She wasn't supposed to speak. Not according to his plan. She calmly connected her laptop to the television. One by one, the documents appeared on screen. The transfers, the signatures, the emails, the hidden conversations, every piece of evidence. At first, nobody spoke. Then the whispers started. Daniel's confidence disappeared. For the first time, he couldn't explain his way out. He couldn't charm the room. He couldn't redirect the conversation. The truth was too clear. His carefully built image shattered within minutes. People who once admired him began questioning everything. Friends distanced themselves. Business relationships disappeared. The reputation he had spent years protecting collapsed overnight. And the legal consequences followed soon after. Several transactions were reversed. Assets were recovered. Investigations began. But the greatest victory wasn't financial. It was emotional. My mother finally stopped blaming herself. She finally understood that trust had been abused. And that betrayal says more about the betrayer than the person betrayed. Months later, we sat together on our porch watching the sunset. For the first time in years, she looked peaceful. Healthy. Free. She smiled at me. You listened to the code. I laughed softly. Of course I did. She squeezed my hand. And in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes revenge is simply exposing the truth. Sometimes justice arrives when lies can no longer hide. Daniel lost the image he valued most. My mother regained her freedom. And I learned that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Because sometimes the quietest people are the ones who uncover the loudest truths. And all it took was 5 numbers. 5 numbers that changed everything forever.